So it's a nice sunny evening on the allotment, and I'm just looking at this apple tree with a view to some pruning. It's the end of winter now, we're almost into March, so I need to get it done before it wakes up again. So normally with apples you do what's called formative pruning in the winter while the trees are dormant. So yeah, it's the right time of year to do it. And I was in a tree the other day, one that I had to climb into, a bigger one, an older one, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be good if I had a GoPro and I could talk about what I was seeing and what bits I was cutting out and why. It'd be so much easier than trying to write something down or give a talk or a presentation about it. There's always these kind of rules that people try to apply, but it's better just to look at a tree and talk about what you're trying to achieve. So if you look at the top part of this tree, you can see there are fruiting spurs coming off some of these branches, and that's where the fruit will form in the autumn. Well, yeah, I'll get blossom in the spring, hopefully, fruit in the autumn. And if those branches aren't strong enough, then they get pulled down, and the tree then, well, sometimes it's okay, sometimes the branches just pull themselves apart a bit, and that's a good thing, and then you get this nice open shape. But sometimes they pull themselves apart completely, and that's not so good. So I have an example down here of that. So there were a couple of twigs coming out here which had a lot of fruit on, and I'm on the path or the trackway at the moment, and they got pulled down to ground level basically, and it's actually ripped the branch apart there. So I should have cut it off at the time, but anyway, I shall cut back to the healthy part, which is this twig has got a future. So now, just something I'm going to mention here. These secateurs, you can see they're quite old. I've got the handles gaffer taped up, so they've seen a bit of action. But you'll notice that the blade, and the bit the blade bypasses, is that called the anvil? Not sure. These are bypass secateurs. Anyway, they're clean, and the blade is reasonably sharp. So even on an old duffed up pair of secateurs, clean them before you start cutting your tree, because a lot of people kind of oil their tools over the winter to stop them going rusty, but you don't want to get oil in the cuts. They won't heal properly, and I can show you an example of that down here. So there was a branch here that again came out into the trackway, and it fell right down to ground level, and I had to cut it off when I discovered it. And I didn't have my tools, I had to borrow a saw from somebody, and it was a rusty saw, and you can see that it's not healed very well. And actually in this branch, there's another bit up here. You can see disease is coming in, so you don't want that. So yeah, if there's one thing that you do when you're pruning, it's clean up your tools, whatever you're using. I mean, they're not like a surgeon's scalpel, but they're not oily and rusty. Now these trees are planted way too close together. There's a reason for that. These were all rescue trees from another project that I didn't think were going to make it, and I just stuck them in there. So they were damaged in the other project. There was, I can't remember what happened now, but a whole load of trees got damaged. And so we took these out and they were going to ditch them, and so I said, nah, I'll see if I can get them to grow. And I had a fantastic crop off them last year, so it was worth doing. But I've made a bit of work for myself, because one of the things that you don't want is kind of crossing branches that are knocking against each other. So I tried to plant, this tree here has got like a weeping habit, whereas this one here has got an upright habit. And the same goes for the one on the end there. So I tried to plant sort of lower growing trees in between higher ones, but they are way too close. So one of the rules they do teach you in pruning is cut out your dead wood, anything that's damaged or diseased. So one of the branches that I think is definitely going to have to go is this one on the outside here to the right, and that's competing with this other tree anyway. So now normally I'd say when you're taking something out, go back to the trunk, but in this case I'm going to cut it off just below that damage, I think, and see if I can get it to grow some new growth, and then that will be in a few years time, that will be where I get my fruit. Now it's getting a little bit dark for this now, but I just wanted to show you something else quickly, if I still can. So just here, can you see this branch goes up and then out, and there's kind of like a little bit of scar in here where it's healed over. Now what that was, some years back, this branch must be 3 or 4 years old, I would have pruned it back to an outward facing bud. So at that time I decided that the branches were too tight in, and I pruned back to an outward facing bud, and then that grew the following year and grew outwards, so you get this kind of like opened up goblet kind of shape. And you can see I've done that again a bit further up with some of the other branches to keep them off of one another. And actually in the middle there you can see I've taken out what was a lead, a centre lead. Normally I try and keep centre leads, but I'm not sure what happened there, maybe it was damaged or something. And yeah, so there's a few tips there. Clean your tools, cut out any dead, diseased or damaged wood, and then prune back to, if your branches are too tight together, prune back to outward facing buds so that your branches are nicely spaced. And ideally you want your fruit on the sort of framework that can support them. So up there I'm going to have to thin it out a bit where there are branches that are crossing and whatnot.